In this video, I'd like to talk a little bit about the various sources of information that you could use if you were, say, investigating a certain topic. Just to make things concrete, I picked a topic for us, which is organic farming. So we might have questions such as, are organic foods more nutritious than non-organic foods? Are they, how harmful are pesticides? What about organic farming practices? Are they better or worse for the environment compared to conventional farming practices? What are the downsides to organic farming? Well, we know organic foods are generally more expensive, but are there other downsides? So let's imagine you're trying to put together this project. You're investigating various questions. Where do you go for information? Well, there's lots of different sources of information out there. And I'm going to just kind of go through the list here. So the first source would be peer-reviewed journals. And there's literally thousands of peer-reviewed journals out there. They're all scientific journals. Some are medical. One example would be Nature. Another is Science. It's literally called Science. It's an American journal. There's a Journal of the American Medical Association. That's of course medically related journal. But these are just a couple. There are literally thousands of these different journals. Now, they're called peer-reviewed journals. What does that mean? Well, an article is submitted to one of these journals by a research group, and then it's essentially read by experts in the field, and then they make suggestions on to how to improve the article. They may suggest new experiments to do. They may find problems with the way the statistics are done, things like that. And so they may accept the journal article with some modifications, or they may actually outright reject the article. So they're very stringent. There's very stringent criteria to get your article published in these journals. It's quite difficult, but it means essentially there's a seal of approval in a sense on these articles. So in some sense, in science at least, those are sort of the highest level of journal. They're ones that we can trust. Now, there are also, within peer-reviewed journals, there may actually be some review articles. So these are written by experts in the field, and they're actually going to summarize the results of many studies. Those actually might be a good place to start. Review articles are actually friendlier to non-experts because they sort of take a step back and will go through some of the basic knowledge. But they're essentially written for experts, so they're not going to be particularly easy for a beginner. Although they could be a starting point for a project on, say, organic farming, for using that example. Now, what else are there? There's also another good starting point for your research would be scientific magazines as well as nonfiction books. So a couple examples here are National Geographic, Smithsonian, Scientific American. Of course, there's many, many more examples of scientific magazines out there. And there's also nonfiction books that are being published all the time that are quite good. Now, these, they don't have the same level of rigor as, say, a peer-reviewed journal articles or even review articles. Actually, I forgot to mention those review articles are actually reviewed themselves. Typically, they're written by the experts, but then other experts will review the review articles typically. So there's a fairly high level of rigor with those articles. Now, if we go to these science magazines, they do have editors and so forth, but they may not be scientifically trained. So the level of trust you can have on a particular science article depends a little bit on the magazine, on the editorial staff, as well as the specific writer. But generally, like with a magazine that has a very high reputation, let's pick the Scientific American, you can generally trust that the articles are pretty good and they've been reviewed pretty thoroughly. Now, another type of source that you may find very useful for your project would be to look at general interest news magazines. This would be just your typical daily news magazines. They often have very topical articles that come out on health, on, again, something like organic farming. They may, they'll essentially refer to the sorts of articles I've just been talking about. Like they may say, okay, an article has just been published in a scientific journal talking about how nutritious organic foods are. Or they may say about how harmful a particular pesticide might be. Okay, so it's actually a fairly good place to start. You may have to just, as a good starting point, and they will often refer you to other articles and so forth that you can then delve into to understand better a topic. So daily newspapers are fine. There's also news magazines that come out monthly. So those aren't bad either. Oh, yeah. So, and one advantage of news magazines and general interest news magazines and daily newspapers is they often may also talk about social, political, ethical, and economic ramifications of the research findings. Now, these sometimes are found in peer-reviewed journals, but often these sorts of things are sort of the specialty of news magazines. So you'd expect to find these sorts of things written about there. Finally, last but not least, there's the internet. So the internet is actually a wonderful source of good information, but it really depends on the site. So there are wonderful sites out there. For example, there's the CDC, the Center of Disease Control, which is a governmental site run by the U.S. government. That's a very highly reputable site. I like the Mayo Clinic. It's quite a good site. It gives information on lots of health-related issues. There's the American Heart Association, and so on. There's many very good reputable organizations that have very good websites with the latest publication, pointing you towards latest discoveries and things like that. So those are quite good. Now, there's also going to be some really terrible sources of information on the internet because basically it's kind of like the Wild West. There's really anything goes. And so you can be fooled quite easily by sites that look professional, and yet they're essentially spewing out garbage that you really shouldn't be paying any attention to. So it's very difficult. I can't, in a quick video like this, tell you exactly how to figure out which is a good internet site and which is not a good one. It'll probably take a little bit of research. As I said, there are some very good governmental sites. There are certain organizations that have a long history that are very reputable and have very good websites. Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the different types of information sources out there. And this is going to be helpful, of course, if you're doing a project or doing some sort of research to delve into a particular topic in great detail.